I think the West cannot feign outrage and issue sanctions when it was Germany, France, Austria, Belgium and the Netherlands who persistently denied Ukraine membership into the European Union, which makes me feel, is the West just using Ukraine for its immediate military purpose? And wasn't it the West, Mr. Verma, that cheered the fall of democracy in Ukraine in 2014 when the sitting president was removed? And now they are talking about democracy. They perhaps enabled the revolt against the democratically elected Ukrainian president in 2014. At that point of time, the American ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, proclaimed his toppling as a great day for our history books. So I think in a way, Mr. Verma, the Americans have used Ukraine and Ukrainians and are letting them deal with it. Yes, please.
Thank you, Arnab. I see that it's an emotional moment for many of your panelists. And as you said, I'll try to put a little bit of perspective on this from my point of view as a professional diplomat observing what is obviously a very unfortunate development. Let's be clear. There has been an invasion of a sovereign country. Russia has invaded Ukraine unilaterally. Now we need a little background to understand why this has happened, and that understand also that both the accused and the accuser are not as innocent as is made out to be in the heat of this ongoing war. Firstly, I think that the United States and NATO believed in a form of unilateralism globally that remained unchallenged for too long. We are all aware that there was the invasion of Iraq. We are aware of what they did in Libya. We know what happened in Syria. We know how NATO intervened in Serbia to create a new country called Kosovo. So it's not as if there is unilateralism only from countries opposed to the United States and NATO. And therefore, for them to be so outraged by the fact that Russia, believing it to be in its own security interests, has acted in this manner, please, for those who are critical of Russia, where were your words of criticism for what United States and NATO, and in particular the United States, has also done in the past unilaterally in blatant violation of a rules-based international order? That has to be understood.
Absolutely correct.
Secondly, I think the United States and NATO have to understand that it's a multipolar world. They have their spheres of influence in terms of security. Other nations also have it. You have to understand this. NATO has expanded towards the east to the borders of Russia following the German unification, and has expanded relentlessly. 14 countries. Please bear in mind the manner in which this has unfolded. Not that I am condoning the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but you have to understand the background. 14 countries have joined NATO. NATO is not a democratic club. NATO is a military and security grouping which can be hostile to other countries which are opposed to it. Therefore, when 14 countries joined NATO, countries which were earlier in the sphere of security influence of the Soviet Union, like Hungary, Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states joined NATO, I suppose they should have anticipated that Russia, as one of the powers in a multipolar world, will at some point draw a line against a military and security grouping that is hostile to it. I think the last frontier was perhaps reached in Ukraine, especially after 2014, when there was a regime change in Ukraine. a certain leader who was at the helm
Yes.
was toppled and a pro-West leader was brought in. And Ukraine was on the verge of becoming part of NATO, right in the underbelly of the Soviet Union, of Russia now. So you have to bear in mind that the United States and NATO have to understand the limits of unilateralism and how far they can push the